Thank you very much. You get me started all choked up. I got too much speaking to do. Pat, one thing was not mentioned in the several introductions he received was that I mentioned this last year, but he's really worked on the Cape Breton version of the Full Monty, and if the price is right after the show tonight, he's willing to do it. Would Mr. Ken Shea please come forward? Spot. Ken Shea, the youngest of 9 living children, was born to Leo and Mary Irene Shea on the North Cape of Prince Edward Island, 8 miles from Tignish. Leo was one of the thousands of Canadians wounded in World War I. He ran the North Cape Lighthouse till 1939, when unbelievably he and Mary Irene packed all 9 kids in a Model T and moved them to Dartmouth, where he opened Shae's Shoe Repair on Portland Street, a business which prospered for some 30 years. From the time Kenny was 11 or 12, he and his brother Vern worked in the shoe shop. Ken left only when he joined the Dartmouth Fire Department at 26. As it happened, almost across the street from his father's business was Paul LeBlanc's pool hall. Unable to get in as a patron, he and his buddies agreed to clean up in exchange for table privileges during times when the place was closed. He was so taken with the sport that he made his own homemade pool table by putting felt on a big crate. Didn't take young Kenny long to realize great personal satisfaction from his abilities with the cue, and he consequently fell in love with the sport. Some of his games ended abruptly when his father came storming into the pool room to forcibly convince Kenny that he should return to work in the shoe store. Eventually, young Kenny began to beat the pants off the local patrons, playing exhibition matches. He had his comeuppance at age 20 when he was beaten in his first tournament. He decided it wasn't a habit he wished to get into, and he didn't. One of his buddies, Tom Osborne, remembers Kenny Shea as an exceptional athlete in everything he undertook. He took up golf at Brightwood one summer and shot in the 80s regularly after only a few months of sporadic practice. As the heartthrob of young damsels at the Micmac Canoe Club dances, Kenny had to defend himself against spurned young suitors. He became good enough to take up boxing. Fighting in 26 professional bouts from 1955 to 1961, he enjoyed it, but made the mature decision to give it up when he discovered that if he got hurt in the ring, he would lose his job. Some of his bouts weren't as dangerous as others. He and the McCluskey brothers, I'm told, used to put up on boxing exhibitions where, and this is only a rumor, of course, on occasion they would stage fake fights using red dye for blood. His boxing career included a bout in Madison Square Garden, but the fight which tells us more about the boy which lurked always close to the surface of the man was one that took place on Prince Edward Island. Half as a lark and half to prove it to himself that he could still do it, Ken Shea dyed his hair to make himself look younger. He assumed an alias and had his last professional fight when he was over 50 years old. He enhanced his prominent sex appeal with a Dean Martin-like voice, which eventually led to his singing professionally with a number of local bands. All over the Maritime, snooker clubs would hire him at their grand openings.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
He's a bashful fellow, as you can tell. They'd hire him at their grand openings to come play exhibition matches, then put on a trick shot show, and then sing with a band at the dance which inevitably followed. From 66 to 70, he was the lead singer for the Montclairs. They played in places such as the Captain's Cabin, the Surf Club, the Spanish Room at Shearwater and Stadacona, the Golden Dolphin, and at local golf clubs. Though they weren't willing to put it in writing, several of his friends say Ken Shea once posed in the nude for a co-ed art class. I don't see any denials coming from the podium. Eventually, even Ken Shea got married and settled down, though another rumor had it that he passed out at his wedding. In the late 80s, when he won the Provincial Snooker Championship for the 3rd time, he considered accepting an offer to join the professional tour, but once again decided that his career better come first. He won his first Maritime Championship in 1956, and his last, ladies and gentlemen, for the 27th time in 1987. At least it was a less dangerous pastime and could be carried on while still maintaining his career as a fireman. Breaking in at the international level didn't come easy. Canada had no national championship, so the only place for Ken Shea to turn was to international tournaments. He remembers breaking in at that level as a long, hard road for unknowns like himself. He played more than 75 matches just to get to the Final Four of his first North American championship. When he found he could compete with the likes of George Chenier, 23-year champion of North America, he decided to go after the title. He came close. He was number two in North America. In 1971, losing to snooker virtuoso Cliff Thorburn, a man you may have seen on the Sport Channel. The International Snooker League has taken him to many parts of the world. In addition to the thousands of matches he's played in the U.S. and here at home, he's played in Bermuda, Malta, and the centers of international snooker in England and Scotland. As one of the world's best amateur players, he's played exhibition matches against many of the world's greatest professionals, including world champion Stephen Hendry. In Malta in '74, Ken Shea was the only Canadian to beat two-time world champion Paul Masseuse. More importantly to Shea, he's led the Canadian team to 5 international titles and has won 9 individual international tournaments. Snooker, as you all probably know, is a game which pits a person against a bunch of balls. There's seldom defense played. There are a bunch of red balls and a far fewer number of other colored balls. The perfect game is one in which the shooter pots a red ball, which permits him then to sink one of the colored balls, which are valued differently. If a player alternately sinks a red ball and the black ball, which is replaced on the table each time it's sunk, and continues to do that until all the red balls are gone, and then sinks each of the remaining colored balls in a prescribed order, 147 points are scored. Of course, everyone knows no one's perfect. Well, in snooker, some people are. Thousands of serious snooker players never came close to the perfect game, but Ken Shea, ladies and gentlemen, has scored 147 points. You ready for this? On 12 separate occasions. Fiercely competitive Ken Shea certainly is, but another story points out a different side to the man you see before you. In Bermuda in 1980, a young 12-year-old reminded Shea of his younger self. After playing the kid in an exhibition game, the young Bermudan fussed over Shea's fancy cue, saying he'd never seen one like that. Instead of advising the kid to save his money and someday he could get a cue like, he gave the cue to the kid. This, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you'll agree, is a Nova Scotian worthy of adulation. A true Renaissance man, our greatest contribution to the world of snooker, our initial 1998 inductee to the Nova Scotia Sport Heritage Center Hall of Fame, Mr. Ken Shea.
Stepping down now, Pat, eh? You know?
For the presentation, we'd like to call upon Mr. Noel Miller.
A little hard to hear.
Mr. Noel Miller.
Mr. Cheevers.
That's right, Cheevers.
The Presidente of the International. Very nice.
Good evening. I apologize for the name, but it's actually Noel Miller Cheevers. I'm president of the International Snooker League, and I'm involved in the world of snooker, both amateur and professional. And I came from England yesterday to be here tonight, which is a great pleasure to me to honor a great friend of mine, Ken Shea. I have been involved with Joe Davis, Stephen Hendry, Alex Higgins, your wonderful world champion, Cliff Thorburn, my great friend, Kirk Stevens, which I hope he's very well. And I've played all these players, and I've also had the pleasure of being in the company of the Nova Scotia sportsman, Mr. Ken Shea. And, you know, ladies and gentlemen, I think you ought to be very proud of this gentleman. He's been a great friend of mine for 20-odd years. He's played in the International Snooker League. Above everything else, he's been a wonderful sportsman. and he's given great pleasure to all of us, and we play snooker all over the world. And above all of that, he is, in my view, and if he had turned professional, I think he would have ranked amongst one of the great professional players today. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ken Shea.
Mr. Noel Miller, President of the International Snooker League, who joins us from London, England tonight. Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. Mr. Shae, do you want to finish that story about the last professional boxing bout that you had at age 50-something?
I'm actually not supposed to talk about that because it was just a thing that just happened, eh? And I got more money for that fight when I was fighting legit.
That happened, I think, in another island somewhere, didn't it?
It happened in my home state, PEI. And I almost got in a little bit of hot water over it, but...
I just want to make the point that Ken was no trifler as a boxer. Although he gained his great international fame as a snooker player, snooker champion, at the same time he was a main event fighter in the Boston Garden, and I guess one of the great battles of your life was against one of the world-ranking middleweights at the time, Joe DiNucci.
Who is a member of Parliament today around the Boston area. I seen him on television a couple of weeks ago. He's a great big man. I didn't realize he was that big until I fought him. He was he was number 3 or number 4 in the world at the time, eh? And they asked me, Kenny, I got a fight for you. I said, I'm all through fighting. He said, I got a fight for you. It's in Boston. I said, I'll take it.
But mostly, the rumor is that you went to snooker because the ball couldn't hit back.
Well, the rails, they bounce, eh? And if you don't watch yourself when you put topping on the ball can hit you in the head.
Kenny, very seriously, the greatest player that you ever competed against?
They're numerous, really. In my play time, when you get an international part of playing, you meet some of the world's best, and you play the world's best, world champions, and it comes to one frame. They say, okay, you got one frame. You play that one frame with that person, you play that one frame with that person. Well, I've beaten a couple of world champions only because of one frame. Now, if we were to play 4 to 7, there'd be no way I'd have a chance with them, you know. But not knowing who I was, they let their defenses down. I actually won a frame over them. That doesn't mean I'm better than them. That means they just let their defenses down. And you cannot do that with somebody who is trying all the time.
There are so many victories and so many matches over so many years, but what was the one that gave you the most satisfaction?
Fred Davis. Fred Davis. My first trip to Nova Scotia, I think I had to be 35 years old. Tommy Lagan arranged it. I played Fred Davis, and Rex Williams were traveling through North America doing exhibitions, and they allowed him in a tournament at North York in Toronto. And with my ability of playing for the 4 days I was there, I drew Fred Davis as the opponent to play, and Cliff Durbin drew Rex Williams. Well, I had Fred Davis down 3-1 at that time. Now, Fred had to be 54 then, because I'm going back 69, okay? How old were you in 69?
Don't ask.
So, and I had a shot at him, but we didn't play the 7th frame. They spotted the black, flipped the coin, allowed us to flip. I didn't know what to do with it, so I sold it out.
You're still competing, still as much fun as ever?
I'm playing. Competing? No, I'm playing.
You're modest. Kenny Shea, ladies and gentlemen, a very worthy addition to the Nova Scotia Sports Hall of Fame.
Riley, for playing tonight.